Hey guys, let's talk Predicta screen covers. I've mentioned issues with these a number of times over the years. Most recently during my batch of 17-inch sets I've been working on, and this is one of those covers. And I'm starting to get some suggestions about how replicas could be made. I've got smart viewers out there. I want to arm you with as much information as possible because I would like to get reproductions made, as would many collectors. My knowledge of plastics manufacturing is extremely limited. So I've been trying to respond to your comments, but I'm a bit out of my depth. So I figured I want to show you one in all the details and inside and out and some of the finer aspects to them. First, let's talk about the issues with these. No, first let's take a step back as to why we would want to make reproductions, because these are extremely collectible sets. Certainly, as far as late 50s TVs go, I think they're the most collectible. I don't know how many were made, but I do know that there are a lot of survivors. I don't doubt for one moment it's because they look cool. Whether or not they work, you can still use them for your decor. And I've seen plenty of examples of folks who have made a 50s themed room and they have one of these sets in there. Problem is, the most visible feature of them is the screen, and these can have problems. There are two distinct types, the 17-inch, the 21-inch, made out of different materials, have different issues. Let's start with the 17-inch, because I just happen to have one out. Now, a few things. One, probably the most important thing, these are not for looks. Not entirely anyways. The primary function of these is to protect someone in the event of the picture tube imploding. See, these picture tubes, it's made out of glass, and there's a vacuum inside. There's tons of atmospheric pressure pushing down on them. If something happens, if they get bumped, or sometimes it just spontaneously happens, that glass breaks. What happens? The atmosphere crushes it, the glass implodes and then explodes. In particular, if you take a look at one of these, the back is made out of another type of plastic, pretty tough, and it's kind of shaped like a funnel. So guess what happens when they implode? It kind of gets focused in the back and shoots out the front. So you need to have some protection here, or the glass would just come flying out. It's got to be able to withstand some pretty significant force. Now, I think that is one of the potentially big issues. We'll just gloss over it for now, but I think even if we came up with a great manufacturing technique, who wants to be responsible for that liability? I'm not a lawyer, but I could see it certainly would be a lawsuit if somebody got injured by a replica face screen cover that couldn't withstand the force. I suppose if one was to sell these, you could have a waiver that somebody would have to sign saying they understand it may not be able to protect them, but I don't think anybody wants to be put in that position, so that's one issue. If we were, say we found a great technique to make these, I think really somebody would have to test them, and I'm not sure what that would involve. So that's one potential issue. Now you may be wondering, hey, but there were reproduction predictors made, like Telstar made some that looked really cool with colored picture tubes that looked just like the originals. Yeah, and I contacted them when they were still in business about getting replica parts, because I figured, hey, they seem to be making replica knobs and screen covers and such. Turns out, no, they didn't. Not the screen covers. More modern picture tubes had integral implosion protection, like bonded safety glass. They would take glass, I think like bulletproof glass. It's not quite right, but something like laminated glass, they would glue it to the front of the CRT rather than having it be a separate piece. So Telstar used something like that, and they just made like a decal of this color and just stuck it to the front of the CRT. So when you were looking at those sets, you weren't looking at a CRT inside of a plastic housing, not on the front of it. You were looking at the actual glass of the picture tube itself, or the bonded safety glass of the picture tube. So that was no help. All right, so how did they make these? I don't know, but I can tell you they are, what's that, about 1/8 of an inch thick or so. These rib, or these things, these fingers that stick out, are thicker than the body. So I don't know if those were bonded on afterwards, or if those were, so I don't know if this was molded or vacuum formed. It seems to me that those are the two basic ways you could go about making something like this. Vacuum form would mean you'd have kind of like a two-part mold. Like imagine if you like filled this up with plaster of Paris and then popped it out, flipped it over, and you put a sheet of plexiglass over it. You can heat that up, and if you put it inside a vacuum, even better, it would suck down and conform to whatever was below it. You'd have a top piece of the mold too and kind of push down on it. That's vacuum forming. And plexiglass works pretty well to do that, apparently. I don't know when you get into like 1/8 of an inch thick how well it works, though. The other way to do it is an injection mold. So again, you'd have like a two-part mold that would kind of bolt together and have a cavity inside, and you would force liquid resins inside of it, and it would cool and harden. And you'd have to be make it very, very nice for a either technique, because it's got to be optically clear, defect-free, which I could see being a potential problem area. And it's not quite that simple. Inside there is a rib that runs around. There's a ridge that sticks up. Now, I don't know if that has anything to do with the strength of it, but it certainly forms a guard for another very notable feature, which is that it's reverse painted, this olive green color all around the outside. This raised portion may very well just be to contain the paint, but also when it's on the set, it's noticeable. It makes a nice barrier around the edge of the picture tube. So it's if it wasn't there and it was just paint going up to the edge, I don't think it would look as nice. These ears are very important because they are what holds this on. So when you put it against this piece also has ears. And there's a metal band that goes around it, and that metal band has cutouts in it that fit into these notches, or fit into these ears. You've got to have these ears. Or at least it'd be really nice if they could be done, because that would make fitting these into a set go much easier. Now looking again at the outer edge, if you set this down, it's pretty much flat. But there is a cutout down at the bottom where that's so the kind of the neck swivel assembly kind of fits down in here. So could you make, let's talk about the vacuum molding technique. Could you make something out of stainless steel or tungsten, whatever kind of metal you'd need, that would have the inverse, the negative image on this, that you could put a piece of plexiglass on, heat it up and suck it down, and could you form these details? Could you form these ears? Or could these ears be glued on and sort of welded on in some manner afterwards? Could this ridge be formed with enough pressure? Or could that be formed in some other manner after the fact? Let's look for some clues too. I just noticed that on these ears there are, well, this could be mold marks. Those ports where they injected the plastic resin. I don't know. So what's the problem with these? Why is there a need for them? because these are brittle. I don't know if they were brittle from day one or if it's from age. It seems like they're tough, and you think, hey, they're implosion protection. It's got to be really tough stuff. No, these can crack pretty easily, and I've seen a lot of them with stress marks, mostly around the bottom. Like, I don't know if from getting bumped into stuff or just over time and gravity, but they get very noticeable marks. It's like distress marks in them, which is not cool. So those are the main two things, is from getting bumped, people try to ship them, whatnot, these get cracks. Of course, they also get scratched and abraded. This one has some weird kind of melty marks on it. I have no idea what happened with it. I bought this one off of eBay with the hopes that I could replace one of my damaged ones. But it itself is damaged. I don't know if that happened in shipping or what the deal was, but it's got some pretty deep kind of cracks and marks in it, in addition to these melt marks. Yes, you can wet sand it, but that can only go so far. When you get cracks that go all the way through or are pretty deep, you just can't get them out. A final feature on these, both 21 and 17 inch, is that they say Predicta or Filco Predicta. It's melted into the plastic. I figure that's probably one of the easier things to do, assuming one could make a metal stamp, heat it up, and just press it into the plastic. Probably a decal could be applied, and that would be good enough, too. Or even without it. It'd be nice to have it, but I don't think it'd be a showstopper if it wasn't there. So, how could we do it? Well, one, assuming we can come up with a technique that could make them, then we need to pay for it. I need to talk to more collectors. I'm just roughly guesstimating how much somebody would be willing to pay for one. And the higher the quality, the more somebody would be willing to pay for it. If it looks kind of shoddy, I'd be more inclined to stick with one that's got some flaws than to get one that looks cheesy. But if somebody could make a replica that looked pretty darn close to the original, just me personally, for my collection, I'd easily be willing to pay $200 to $300. Which is what you can sometimes, if you're lucky, get an unrestored set for. But to have a pristine screen cover, and I would want to buy some spares too. So yeah, it'd be a little painful maybe, but if somebody offered them right now, I'd probably buy 10 at $250 a pop. I'd put it on a credit card. If it was a chance of a lifetime, I'd probably be willing to go higher. I gotta believe there's other collectors out there who'd be willing to fork up the same amount of money, maybe more. I mean, just the fact that I have about a dozen here right now, most of which belong to customers just in a matter of months, I figure there's got to be at least a few thousand of these sets out there, maybe a few tens of thousands of sets out there. So say we got 1,000 people committing $250, it's $250,000. What could that get you? How much does it cost to make some type of mold? I've heard figures ranging from like 10 to 25,000, somewhere in that ballpark. Okay. Could we get a Kickstarter? Could we get people to pledge some money up front, with the promise that they would be guaranteed to get some of the covers? If we made 10,000, even though we only had like 1,000 people committed to buy them, would it be worthwhile to have extras made and sell them over the ensuing years? I'm not a marketing guy. I'm not a manufacturing guy. These are just some numbers I came up with. All right, now let's go big. Let's talk the 21 inch. These have bigger issues. These are used in, well, the non-17 inch sets, 21 inch sets, the Holiday, the Tandem, the Continental. Typically, those sell for more money. Certainly the Continental and Tandem are the two most valuable, I would argue. Those sets, fully restored, can sell for well over $1,000. So again, I think collectors would be willing to pay a premium for these. Now, the issues with these is these are made out of tenite or butyl, I forget what the exact type of plastic is. But basically, they're made out of a type of plastic that outgasses. It's also based on cellulose. So it's kind of organic. Well, I mean, plastics are organic, but I mean, this is more organic than the other types of plastic, meaning that these basically decay over time, kind of like old celluloid film. And that leads to two problems. One, they smell, because they continuously outgas. If you've smelled like screwdriver handles that have gotten kind of chalky and you open up an old tool chest and you get that smell of vomit, it's the same thing, same type of plastic. They still make this because it's really tough stuff. But I guess now they've found some additives they can put in there that reduce or eliminate the odor and the decomposition of it. The decomposition seems to be accelerated by the heat and humidity. I've seen some discussion as to whether it's a chemical or is it like a bacteria kind of breakdown. I don't know. Maybe it's both. But it seems like it's inevitable. And not only do they get a chalky film on the surface, you have to clean them periodically, they shrink, they warp. I've got one or two that look really nice, but they've shrunk on the sets. So the 21-inch sets have the same type of plastic for the back. The front shrinks and you start getting a gap. And over time that gap gets to be more and more. So for the 21-inch sets, every owner eventually is going to have problems. And in spite of how tough these are, they can also crack. They can get damaged. So there's that. But eventually, over time, these will all fall apart, shrink, disintegrate, rot away. The 17s, if they're kept safe, may last for decades. I don't know, but these will not. 50, 100 years from now, it's going to become more and more and more of an issue over time. So I think there's even more of a push. Because if nothing else, even if you've got a pristine one, the odor issue and having to clean them. I probably cleaned this one like a month ago, and it's already got a film forming on it. That's annoying. So it'd be cool if we could make replicas of these out of plexiglass or something. Otherwise, they're pretty darn similar. These are a bit chunkier. They're heavier. Of course, it's larger, but the material might be a little bit thicker, or it's just inherently more heavy, I think. They have a tint to them. I don't know if that's a result of the type of plastic or they thought it was a nice thing to do. I don't know, but the 17s are clear. These have a bit of a greenish, grayish kind of tinge to them, or I don't know. It seems like that the tint varies a bit from cover to cover. But otherwise, the same ears, the same ridge on the inside. It's not as prominent in these. And then reverse painting, and then the embossed, or not embossed, but melted in. Filco Predicta. Some have it at the bottom. And then the same kind of cutout down here where the neck goes. And again, I think people will be easily happy. Probably people will be willing to pay even more for these. Because even if you've got a beautiful set with a great screen cover, just the odor and having to clean it, I think would push some people to want to buy a replica and maybe be willing to pay over $300 for one. I'm just speculating. I don't know. I know, I want to have one really, really nice 21-inch and one really, really nice 17-inch. The rest I'll probably sell eventually. I want my 21-inch. I've got a brand new picture tube I'm going to put in it. It's a tandem set. It's a blonde tandem set. I would like to have a pristine, beautiful screen cover for it that will last the rest of my life. I'd be willing to pay over $500 for one. That's just me. Others may have differing opinions, but again, I think there is a market for them. How much of a market? I don't know. And that liability issue scares me a bit, because I think that would scare off manufacturers, unless we're just all going to ignore it in which case some people could find themselves getting really burned down the road. As far as repairing them goes, the 17-inch, I have some hopes, if they have cracks, to do something very similar to what they do for cracked car windshields. I've got some industrial kind of acrylic solvent that has basically no solids. It's just pure solvent, a high VOC. I'm hoping I can flow that, or use capillary action to flow into the cracks and fuse, weld the plastic back together enough that the optical distortion is not really an issue. Tennite, you can kind of make a slurry with lacquer thinner and kind of glue it, but to make it optically clear, defect-free, I had no luck with that. It just turned into a messy... I had one that had a bad crack, like a chunk missing, and I made a slurry and kind of filled it in and tried to then buff it out, and it just was all cloudy and looked horrible. So I don't really think these can be repaired realistically. We need to make new ones. Alright, I think that's all the information I can give you guys. Put on your thinking caps. When I go to the convention, I hope to spark some more conversation about this. Maybe it can't be done, or not realistically. I mean, obviously it can be done, because it was done. These were made. These were made by man. Somebody figured out how to do it. Obviously it could be done again. It's just a matter of money and finding somebody to do it. Please leave your thoughts and comments. Thank you.